I truly feel like there's 100 bass sitting right there. And I can't get them to bite everything. You would think you just throw a shoe in there, baby shoe in there, hook it on a treble hook and throw it out there and you get a bite. It's not that easy. All right, so the first place that I'm going to start looking for groups of fish are places like creek channels that come out like this one right here. This is a typical place on the Tennessee River. This area right here would be the high percentage area. Not saying there's gonna be a school of fish there, but somewhere along this creek channel, these bass, you gotta think creek channels is like highways or roads that we use for our cars. This is where they use to sort of make their way out to their to their summer haunts or winter places and all those places. So it's their travel corridor. So I always come down through these places, and normally I'll graph around the creek channel, but normally this time of year, these fish have normally made it out there to the main river channel, which is right here, and should be somewhere around these areas, these mouths of these creek channels. This is a very textbook and defined creek channel that comes out here to the main river. So it's definitely a place to at least start. Those are normally gonna be where your community holes are and places that get a lot of pressure, but it at least gives you an idea of places to start and seeing if those fish are offshore and if they're grouped up. There's like periods of time that go by throughout the year, and like as the summer months go on, there's some schools that will move and there's some schools that are just showing up. So the best case scenario is you find a fresh school of fish that just pulled out to the main river channel or pulled out to that offshore spot. It's not likely all the time, but when you do find those fish, you can tell when they're not pressured, or a sneaky place that those fish have not been pressured, because those are the places that literally when you make your cast, you're gonna get a bite. Like when you get a bite instantly, you know it's probably those fish have not been pressured that bad, or they just got there. It takes a lot of time and effort to find a group of fish, and I feel like, you know, it's made it so much easier this day and age to where we can sit here and literally find the biggest group on a particular spot, or if they're set up the right way and if you want to fish them. So I spend a lot of my time right here doing what you're seeing right now until I see exactly what I'm looking for. And that's normally just fish that are grouped up pretty tightly. It normally gives me a pretty good indication that they're set up in the feeding position. So that's what we're looking for. We haven't found it yet. Time of year, current is a huge player. TBA ledge fishing 101. You know, this is what it's all about. And when that current starts to generate a little bit, normally happens in the afternoons, those fish are very current dependent. And when that happens, it's almost like a light switch sometimes, and they group up. So we're just sort of biding our time, waiting for that current to start, see if we can't find us a few. Suckers. You son of a guns, you. Y'all wanted to play. Y'all thought you were slick. I'm not so sure that's them, but I'm pretty sure that's them. There could be some named catfish down there too, though. It's the only problem. They're so deep, it's hard to tell. When they get that deep, it's like a lot of times, it's just like a, we'll find out. It's trial and error. So we found a group of fish. They're out fairly deep. A lot of times what you'll find is there'll be a lot of white bass mixed into schools. And so, especially on this particular fishery that we're at. So I'm marking some of the stuff. Some of the fish are stocking horizontally and some of them are stacking vertically. So normally if they're vertical, most of the time that gives a pretty good indicator it's stripe or white bass. If they're horizontal along the bottom, that's what you really want to look for. So these fish are really deep, but again, it's not like I instantly am going to know. I know I've fished this way a lot my whole entire career, but you're not instantly going to know. You still need to make a cast sometimes to determine if that is truly what you think it might be. So I could see a couple of them in there that look a little bit like maybe catfish, but then they're so deep that we're just gonna have to make a couple casts and see what it is. I'm pretty sure that's them, almost positive actually. That's a big group of them, almost actually guaranteeing it, but you might as well make a cast. They're freaking a quarter mile away from where they normally are. That's why no one finds them. It's because you don't, like if you just go to the same stuff, they always are moving. That's the thing. The fish are always moving. It doesn't matter what. It's like if they get pressured, they're gonna move, and then you gotta re-find them. And sometimes they're a quarter mile away. Sometimes they left. Most of the time they don't leave. they just slide away from all the pressure. Now we gotta figure out how we're gonna catch these suckers. So what we'll do first, let me rig something up. A lot of times what I'll do, especially on a new school of fish, to determine what they are, is I'll go to a finesse application first. All right, so this one right here is a little new Tokyo rig for this year. It's a Finesse Neko Tokyo. So it has the Neko, Finesse Neko hook on it. It's actually the hook that I use for drop shotting. And you can put this on this is actually a 2-aught. Little finesse worm. Let's see here. I'm gonna throw him first and then determine. A lot of times it gives you the best chance. There you go, we'll see. Let's see if we can get a bite. There he is. It's probably the deepest fish I've ever caught on the Tennessee River. Just like that. That's what's up. Just like that. That's how you gotta do it. Pick up the finesse tactic first. Oh, come on. So that's what I do a lot of times. The little Finesse Neko Tokyo rig. You know, to check that school to make sure that's exactly what I was seeing on my graphs. And that's exactly what I got a bet on. Now, that doesn't mean that's gonna be the #1 bait that I'm throwing, but it's at least a technique that I know I can get to the bottom quick. This is actually a 1/2 ounce tungsten rugby weight, but you can go up to a 1 ounce with it. So it just sort of keeps it on the bottom. So especially when you're fishing deep fish, allows you to keep that bait on the bottom. Different application, different technique, but there you go. We definitely know that's bass. Let's see what else we can get in bite. So the key is, let me see here. Let me think about the application. Got these fish out here, very deep water. All right, I'm tied on a 1/2 ounce hybrid Swimbait jig head. You're gonna need something with a little bit of weight. Sometimes you can go up to a 3/4, but I got this sort of a finesse application still. Fish probably are pressure, that's why they left wherever they were at. So I'm downsizing, but still I feel like a swimbait's gonna get a little bit better than average bite than sort of the finesse applications of a drop shot or a Finesse Tokyo or something like that. So what I'm gonna put on the end of him is a little Largo shad. It's a 4-inch Largo shad, new color called gizzard shad, which a lot of times that's what the fish are beating on the Tennessee River. Put this guy up, get him on there. And I don't know, I mean, this is the thing is it's trial and error out here. You don't know the best bait that's always going to catch them. But that's why you have to have, that's why I have as many rods as I do on the deck, is to have multiple different applications. I actually had a jig head, it's like a 5/16 on, and I think I'm gonna need a 1/2 at least to get down there. Throwing lighter line, 12-pound line, is gonna allow me to get it down there a little bit deeper. Now, if I was throwing like 17, you wouldn't be able to probably get that down there as easy. And so what this little jig head has, I actually just screwed it halfway on, has a little keeper there. You screw that swim bait on there so it locks it in place. That way, when you get it there and locked in place, it's not gonna pull down. There's no super glue, none of that. So now it's ready to go. Let's see if we can get a bite. There he is. There he is. First cast. Not a big one, but hey, right there. That's what did the damage. About a pound and a halfer. Not a big one, but I bet there's some bigger ones in there. Let's get this guy. The first thing we did was definitely trying to find that school. We found the school, we located the school, and the school was not exactly where you would have thought they would have been. They weren't on the community hole. And a lot of times they're gonna move because of pressure. Those fish aren't dumb. I mean, they might have a small brain, but them suckers, they're gonna move. Now we're just going through the rotation. Now that we've located the school, we started with the finesse applications. Now we're sort of rotating through a couple different baits to see what is the best technique in getting those bigger ones to bite or more of those fish to bite. And so far, it's not been too bad. 2 casts, 2 fish, it's pretty good. And a lot of times that's the thing, is when you're trying to look for places that are sneaky, out of the way, and that's what I try to find at places when I'm fishing tournaments, is places that are a little bit less obvious. You either got to go deeper or shallower. Too shallow to scan them, or just barely can scan them. Too deep where not many of your other competitors are looking that deep. So the big thing is, we're not casting blind. We marked these fish specifically. I'm looking at here, I have my Lowrance, both my Lowrance's Ethernet set up to where they can share waypoints. I'm sitting here, I'm casting exactly where I marked those fish. And so that's the thing, is you don't want to be, if you're 10 foot to the left or 10 foot to the right, if it's a smaller school of fish, you're normally probably not going to get a bite. So it's really very important to pay attention to where your waypoints are, pay attention to where those fish were at and located, set up on them, and that's normally how you get them to bite. I mean, the big thing for me, even when I'm fun fishing, I'm constantly trying to figure out, like, if I'm fishing like a community hole or a place that's just whatever, just trying to figure out what baits I can trigger these fish on. It's constantly changing offshore. It changes every year. There's always new baits that tend to play. And now it's sort of made that trend somewhat back to old school stuff. So I'm just trying to always go through the tackle box, and there's a new bait that came out, I'm gonna try it, and hey, an old bait that used to catch them and hasn't forever, I'll try him, and throwing a spoon, and I haven't really, a spoon was really hot a couple years back, and now it's gotten a little bit tougher to get them to bite it. So you just gotta play with it a little bit, because all of a sudden there'll be times it'll trend, a little bit, where those fish will get to the point where they stop seeing a certain bait, and all of a sudden that's the bait for the year, or the bait for that week or the month. For me, it's a huge deal to be able to figure out a technique or something that maybe is not as traditional as everything else, or it might be something that was forgotten, like an old big spinner bait. So I'm constantly trying to just figure that out, and when I do, it's just sort of, regardless, if it's a tournament or not, if I'm just fun fishing, it's just the satisfaction of knowing that I figured out something that is gonna get those fish to bite. That's understanding there's 100 bass sitting right there, and someday, more than likely, my boat is gonna be the ticket of catching a ton of them.
Feel that?
That one's a better one. Gosh, it's so hard to get to bite. Literally have gone through 10 or 15, probably 10 baits. Picked up the old trusty football jig. Oh, he come off. That's the one thing about it right there. Picked up the football jig and got a bite instantly. How about that? Yeah, that's what you gotta do though. Like literally, you'll figure out a certain bait, you'll get a couple bites on, and then it'll transition from there. And you have to keep showing them something different. I truly feel like there's 100 bass sitting right there, and I can't get them to bite everything. You would think you just throw a shoe in there, a baby shoe in there, hook it on a treble hook and throw it out there, and you get a bite. It's not that easy. That's why you have to constantly go through stuff. And I actually twitched that bait, and he bit it right here. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's like a cadence of dragging it or twitching it. This is my 7.3 heavy, so I might have even, that fish had barely, because he was so deep, I leaned into him. I thought I hooked him pretty good, just didn't get past the barb right there. But I'm just sort of hopping around trying to make this fish react. So I've made a progression through multiple different baits, basically 8, 9, 10 baits. Swim bait, caught one on a swim bait, hooked one on a jig, had my first bite on the Finesse Neko Tokyo rig. So I went back to that, and that's throwing a little small drag and drop, something small, little pink color. But I think a lot of times that's just visually, when you get down to that depth, those fish can see those brighter colors a little bit better. So just taking my time, trying to make sure. Now the thing is, I'll probably troll back over. Oh, there was a bite. Oh, that's it. That might be a better one. Not a big one. Come here. There you go. That's exactly where you want to hook them, right there. Top of the mouth, roof of the mouth. And that's what that Neko hook does so well though. Like I literally hooked him really well. And that's another thing, when you don't have to, you see how I set the hook on that fish. You don't have to reel down and just set the hook as hard as you can. You get the pull set sometimes. I mean, that's not a really big fish, it's about 1.5 pounders, but that just tells you right there. Hey, first cast, I throw that Finesse Tokyo rig out there. It's like, you know, I think the biggest thing between a Finesse Neko Tokyo rig and a drop shot is, number one, the distance the bait or the weight is to the actual bait and the hook. So it's just a little bit elevated. So you fish it very similar a lot of times, and I can snap this around because it's so compact. I can still snap it around, and we're still figuring ways out of how to fish a Tokyo rig. It's something that's new and newish. It's been around for a while, but we're still figuring this whole thing out. But the other thing with this particular setup is I can throw a wacky rig on there. You know, I don't have to necessarily just Texas rig it. I can do a lot of different things. I can throw a Swimbait on that exact same setup and reel it around. So it's really got a lot of options. But what I'm doing right here with like that, a very similar application to what I would be doing with a drop shot, shaking it down there. It's just not as elevated up off the bottom. So sometimes when like I'm trying to sort of keep it more compact, keep it closer to the bottom, keep it closer to the cover, this particular setup seems to do better than a drop shot would. The one other thing that I really feel like, you know, when I'm fishing deeper water is when I'm throwing that tungsten rugby weight down there, I feel like I really get that good feel of what's going on, especially when it's connected to that steel wire. It really does a good job of giving me that understanding of what's down there on the bottom. I'm not saying drop shot weight with just a single drop shot, you know, tungsten weight down there doesn't, but I feel like I get a little bit more detail of what's happening down there on the bottom, a little bit more of a direct connect to what's going on. There's one. There we go. Oh, a little Finesse Neko Tokyo rig fish. I'll tell you what, it's been very difficult to get these fish to bite. A lot of fish to fire, and sometimes just that little bit of finesse applications can really get the job done, you know. And hey, not a great big one, about 2.5 pounder.